I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome back to Biased Reactions to Lost Omens, Gods and Magic, Part 5 of 5.
When we last stopped on Part 4, we were being biased about feats, such as syncretism. Now it's time to be biased about spells, magic items, and giant deity tables.
Yes.
Yes. So, we can start with spells.
Acid Storm.
That's right.
A giant storm of acid that pelts an area.
Yes. It deals acid damage every round to creatures that are in the area. Then there's Acidic Burst.
Acid Rain on steroids.
It's an acid spell that's first level that is not on the Divine list. What could that be for? Well, we said last time in the last episode, it's so that acid gods can have a spell to give it first level, because all gods give a spell at first level. It's a 5-foot emanation around you that deals acid damage to everything near you in an amount about equal to Burning Hands.
Agitate's a fun one. It's a spell that makes people that requires the target to stride at least once per turn or take 2d8 mental damage because they are so distressed and agitated. Yes,
it's actually really cool, and the damage profile is pretty strong. It pretty much obviously needs like some clarification that most people can tell, but not everyone can. That like a creature that doesn't have stride, or like, you know, like it only has a swim speed, or it only has a flight speed. Like they can do their other kinds of, they should be able to do their other kinds of movement
stuff,
if they want to. So that it's the same profile of like, do you spend the action or do you take the damage? And your allies might have attack of opportunity so that they get hit even if they do spend the action. Obviously, you shouldn't be allowed to like sub in step or something like that that does not trigger reactions, but it's a really cool spell. It needs that clarification. Animus Mine is a fun one. It's a really low-level spell to be something that lasts an hour, and the idea is you plant a bomb in your head so that if somebody is trying to use mental magic against you, that it triggers the Animus Mine and deals a lot of mental damage to you. Now, it says effect and not spell or magic, so it's kind of weird, because that means if someone's like, oh, hello, Mark, I shall make a request of you. Could you please give me a bite to eat? Then, so, I mean, like, obviously it's not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But technically, like, some of those things are mental effects that, because they don't work on mindless creatures, that don't make any sense to. The Animus Mind idea is something, it literally says in the flavor, if it's going into your thoughts and your head.
It's trying to manipulate your thoughts, go into your head. It explodes, and it can also stun them, too.
Yeah, it totally can stun them. Even just a failure stuns them, and a critical failure stuns them as well.
Stuns them and means that you're completely unaffected by whatever they're trying to do.
You ignore their magic spell if they get a critical failure, because they were too stunned to actually do it. So it's like, it's great when your enemy is constantly trying to do mental effects on you, and
that'll teach them to like try to detect thoughts on you.
Yeah, or even just like fear is a mental effect, right? Or the dreaded synesthesia. So there's a lot that you can do when.
Altra says, "Tell us lies." Did you just lie? No. Then why are you bleeding from your ears?
Yeah. Or even telling the truth, right? Making it a good impression. It's like, oh, hello, I'm Elftro. What? And then Elftro's bleeding from their ears. It's like, did you lie about being Elftro? No. Why are you bleeding from your ears? Oh, I was just trying to be friendly and make a good impression on you. So, yeah, it's obviously not supposed to do that. Anticipate Peril is an interesting one. It gives a bonus on your next initiative roll sometime in the next 10 minutes. And you can heighten it up to a very high bonus if you're willing to spend a very high level spell slot. And, like, obviously at level 13, you're not going to be like, I'm going to use my highest level spell to give myself a +4 once, but when you're really, really high level, and, or what you might be like, hey, a +4 on my next initiative, it's going to be the big boss. I'm willing to spend the 7th level slot on that. So it's always one where when it's a few levels down from your top level, you might be like, this is good. I should put it on my on the most important character in our group so that they can go first. Befuddle is a fun first level spell that can make the target clumsy and stupefied, even on a success. So it's only lasts a round, but if you've got an enemy spellcaster, even stupefied 1 gives them like not a huge chance, but a decent chance to fail their spell, and losing the tempo of if they're like a boss, losing the tempo of their spell for that round gives a huge advantage to your party. And the clumsy 1 is a debuff to their AC that's gonna combine with flat-footed. Brand the Impenitent lets you put a brand so that people could see that followers of your faith can see that this is an impenitent person who gets lower AC against them, basically.
And the saving throw affects how long it lasts. If they critically fail, then the brand is just there.
They're always branded.
Yes.
Chilling Spray, which I believe was picked up in the Advanced Player's Guide, and we already talked about it, does cold damage in a cone and can also lower move speed. So it's actually a stronger spell for if you're like a kind of person who's a frontliner and you run up and spray this on enemies, and then it's like, well, they don't have enough speed to get around you to the people in the back line. Or you can spray it on the enemies and then run back if you think it'll make the difference in require them to take 2 actions for your 1 action to catch up to you.
Legit.
Cup of Dust.
It's the curse of unquenchable thirst.
Yes, you can never get the drink that you want to drink.
You can fatigue them and cause them to take damage every hour.
That's right.
For an entire day.
Yes, and it will deal damage every hour for an entire day. And that is a lot of damage. And in fact, it can't be healed until it quenches its thirst. And drinking does not quench its thirst. So at the level where you first get it, it will probably kill whoever you cast it on.
Yes. Like
automatically within 1 day. But eventually it won't. Basically. And the critical failure, they take twice as much damage, and even at higher levels, that will probably kill whoever you cast it on.
Yes.
But maybe they can get it removed. Then there's Endure. It gives, it's an arcane and occult spell, notably arcane, which doesn't have healing.
And it lets you grant a creature temporary hit points for a round.
It's 1 action as well. So you can cast it as your final action, and it gives, potentially if you heighten it up, quite a bit of temporary hit points. So it's nice because, like, you say you're super high level, and you're like, I don't care about my 6th level spell slots, but I can give 30 temporary hit points to the already full hit point frontliner for 1 action, and right before they run in.
Yeah.
That's a lot of temporary hit points.
Those last actions that you may have otherwise been spending on, I know that for me, like, shield is a go-to. What's my 3rd action going to be on a caster, and that's another spell to put into that
Absolutely.
Pool.
Expeditious Excavation lets you kind of dig through the dirt and the gravel, and you can make a pit, and then they have to make a save. Reflex save or acrobatics check, their choice, to try to not fall into the pit. So that kind of covers your create pit situation without having all of the...
but this is in another dimension.
Ridiculous corner cases and weirdnesses of the PF1 create pit that caused it to be an adjudication nightmare 50% of the time. Feast of Ashes is lower level than Cup of Dust, even though you might think, like, hunger and not being able to eat sounds like it sounds like a bigger deal than not being able to drink, but water dehydration will kill you sooner.
Much faster, yeah.
And that's why Feast of Ashes is lower level than Cup of Dust. And it will make it so that you can't eat, which means you take damage each day until you can eat, and then you can eat, and it lasts a week. So it actually probably will not kill you. when you originally get. Maybe it depends. Like 7d4 might be able to kill someone. And then 14d4 for a critical failure.
Yeah.
That could probably kill someone when you first get it because you're only a 3rd level character.
Makes sense.
Fungal hyphae. That makes like hyphae that grow out of your feet and connect you to all other plants, giving you a weird, imprecise Trevor sense with things that are touching plants.
And this is one of those spells that has a much more interesting and complex heighten. Because, you know, fair number of spells have a heighten that's, okay, let's scale this up so that it's still going to pack a punch at the appropriate levels. But this one has a lot of other abilities.
You become able to control the plants in there and attack with them, and then even be able to do manipulate actions through the plants. So, yeah. Then there's Gravity Well, which kind of just makes a well of gravity that's a very large burst and just pulls everything into the center. Kind of fun. Ill Omen, where it's a 1st level spell. When they fail their will save against Ill Omen, then they're going to get misfortune on their next
attack roll or skill check.
Yep. And
if
critical
they
failure,
fail, then it lasts for the entire round.
Yeah, all their attack rolls and skill
them.
checks. Absolutely. Then there's Iron Gut, which is a 2nd level spell that is like, you reach down your throat to store or retrieve an object. Who wouldn't want to be able to do that? Plus,
welcome back, Ular. Hi, Kieran.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi,
glad you're able to make it today. Plus, it's easier to conceal things because people don't know that they need to specifically search your mouth and stomach.
That's a very goblin-y spell, I think.
And then you can heighten it for a longer duration.
You just gotta be careful if you have that if you have like some of the goblin's abilities to digest more things that you don't eventually accidentally dissolve the item that you were trying to store down there.
Then there's Liberating Command, which is a 1-action spell that lets your ally use a reaction to try to use the escape action to get out of something that they would normally be able to escape from.
Elf says Kirby the spell. Kirby the spell will be like you eat the sword and then like you turn into a giant sword.
Yeah, or you suddenly gain sword powers.
Yes.
Message Rune is a 1st level spell. You cast it for 5 minutes, and then for a day you have a 5-minute long message that is on a special rune that has a trigger, and during the duration of the spell, creatures who meet the trigger touch the rune and have the recorded message repeat in their head telepathically.
Kirby's actually terrifying if you really think about him. He's like, I'll devour you and I will turn your powers into myself.
Yeah, he is. Penumbral Shroud is a shadowy spell that helps you perceive the light in an area as 1 step lower than it is, which can help you if you have light blindness, or be bad if you don't have light blindness, which is why you get a save if you're unwilling, and it gives you a bonus on saves against light effects. Reflective Scales.
Speaking of light.
Yeah, I mean, that Reflective Scales actually doesn't have the light trait, but it gives you scales that reflect either acid, cold, electricity, fire,
like bouncing
or poison.
Off damage, not light.
Yeah, and you gain resistance, and basically what happens is it stores up. It's like Draconic Reservoir from PF1, but has a name that's like more obvious of what it does. It stores up energy, and then as a 2-action activity, you explode outward in a 20-foot radius, potentially dealing 10d6 damage at max. And then you can heighten it to do more and more and more damage.
But the spell's name doesn't make what it does quite so obvious as Share Lore does, which allows you to
share lore.
Choose a lore skill in which you're trained, and let the targets become trained in that lore skill for the duration of the spell.
It's super useful, especially when you have the heighten that lasts for like an hour, and you're like, we have to do this social etiquette thing, and I have a lore that is
because if you've got the right lore for a situation, then the DCs are going to be lower, so
and
you
then
can let the whole party use that. Yeah,
up to 5 creatures for an hour for the 3rd level version. That's your whole PFS party that now has the best possible lore.
Yeah, for sure.
Shattering Gem, 1st level spell. It's an earth spell for earth deities. It basically makes a gem with some hit points that like floats around you erratically, and people who attack you might hit the gem. And if they do hit the gem, then their damage goes to the gem first, and then you, and then the gem blows up and deals slashing damage. So the differences between that and Endure is that, first of all, it might not block an attack at all. Second of all, it only affects you, it affects a creature.
Yeah, it affects a creature.
It lasts longer. It might not block an attack, and it blows up. So, it's got some different advantages and disadvantages. Of course, it's a 2-action spell.
Yes.
Now, if you really want to give someone a lot of extra points, you can give them a high-level Shattering Gem and a high-level Endure on the same turn.
And then just watch the enemy be like, okay, forget this.
Yeah, forget this person.
Forget this person. I'm not going to.
I have to do up to 60 damage before I'm actually hurting them, depending on my DC 11 flat check. If we cast 2 6th levels, it could be more for 10th level. But then you're like, why did you use your 2 10th level spells on that? Shifting Sand.
Don't tell me what to do with my 10th level spells.
You had to take a 20th level feat to even get the second 10th level spell. Why did you use one on a 1-round thing? Just because you wanted to get 50 temporary hit points?
Because I like my gems.
Alright, so Shifting Sand makes a shifting difficult terrain sand that is so churning that you can wind up becoming immobilized, and as you sustain the spell, the opponents can become potentially immobilized. They can, maybe if they're lucky, ignore penalties to skill checks that it gives. It gives penalties to skill checks, and when it's heightened, the penalties to skill checks, such as acrobatics to tumble through and athletics, goes up and up and up to -4 eventually, and the range increases and the area becomes a 40-foot burst of pain.
Yeah.
Shockwave is a 1st level Earth spell because Shattering Gem was not enough 1st level non-divine Earth spell, so now there are 2 options. Shockwave, you kind of like make a on the ground, and then it makes creatures flat-footed.
But they're pretty different thematically, though, because one of them's a gem, and one of them's more like an earthquake.
Yeah, one of them's a protective gem, and the other one's an earthquake that makes things flat-footed and prone. Then there's Show the Way, where you find the best way forward, and
it really helps you when you're traveling long distances to find your way around difficult terrain and to get there faster.
Yep, Slough Skin. You kind of slough off your skin, and your skin regenerates, which can get bad stuff out of your body and help you on persistent things. There's actually a bunch of effects that all make sense for if you're sloughing skin constantly, and one of which is that it's easy to track you because you're leaving shed skin behind you at all times. Yeah, Temporary Tool.
Necromancy spells are not always, like, the prettiest.
That's right. Temporary Tool conjures a tool that lasts for a minute or until you do, like, kind of one use out of it, whichever comes first. It's whatever tool you really need. Tether is another 1st level spell. It makes chains, vines, or other tethers to bind the enemy. Which, they slow them down and then potentially immobilize them. Time Bacon, which is actually Time Beacon.
It's not bacon.
Yes, I know, but some people type it as Time Bacon.
Yes, Time Bacon.
Time Bacon is a spell that basically you cast it and then for 1 action, and then you do the rest of your turn, and if you don't like it, then you go back to just after the Time Bacon.
Bacon.
Yes. So at that point, if something really terrible happens to you during your turn after you cast it, the terrible thing, the Time Bacon tries to counteract it to undo it. But that means, like, if you get smoked by a powerful deity or something like that, you can't use the magic to go back through that.
Yes. Whirling Scars, as you can see... oh, wait, I have not flipped the page.
You've not flipped the page, Linda. You've not flipped it twice.
There we go. I was too focused on the version I could actually properly see it there. Here's Penumbral Shroud here.
And then
here we have Whirling Scarves, as you can now see here, which surrounds you in a vortex of whirling colorful scarves.
It makes you concealed against ranged and melee attacks. When a melee attack fails to hit you,
you can snag it up in those scarves and make it harder for your opponent to attack you.
That's right. It makes it harder and harder for that particular weapon or unarmed attack because it's snagged in the scarves until the end of that turn. And the timing of the scar's movements makes the concealed flat check harder against ranged attacks, and then you can heighten it to make even more
penalties even more penalties for snagged melee weapons, and make it even harder for ranged weapons to hit you.
Yes. It's a real pain in the butt at high levels, because if they miss you once, then they're going to get taken massive penalty on everything else. Alright.
Now we've got...
Hiram Velfor is a player who must be like a sorcerer because they have the extend spell. It would be an Imperial Sorcerer. They like to extend it to 10 minutes with Imperial Sorcerer so that it's just constantly scarves. New domains!
Yes, new domains for some of the deities in this book. We have Change, Cold, Decay, Delirium, Dust, Duty, Glyph, Lightning, Plague, Repose, Sorrow, Soul, Star, Swarm, Time, Vigil, Void, and Wormkin.
That's right. New domains by James Case.
Yes.
18 new domains. That is a lot of domains. So what have we got? Change has 2 things you can do. You can adapt self or do adaptive ablation. And if you adapt yourself, then, like, if you're in the water, you can swim and breathe in the water. If it's dark, you gain dark vision. If you're in heat or cold, you become adapted to those. You adapt to your surroundings. Then adaptive ablation is a reaction where you take a certain kind of damage and then you adapt to that kind of damage, and for a minute you gain resistance to that type of damage, but only after you take the damage. So it applies to the next time.
The cold domain, as you might expect, has 2 effects that allow you to do cold damage in different ways. Winter Bolt is basically throw an icicle with great force at someone, and it can anchor into them as well. And Diamond Dust creates a super cools the nearby air to form a cloud of dancing ice crystals around you that freezes anyone who is not yourself who comes into the area.
That's right. Decay has Withering Grasp and Fallow Field. Withering Grasp is going to let you wither with negative damage something that you are touching. And if they try to shield block with a shield, then you wither the shield too. And then Fallow Field makes an emanation when a creature tries to, like, recover hit points in there. It's not going to work very well unless they get a critical success. Or success. Critical success gets rid of it. But failure, they get half as much, and critical failure, they get nothing back. Yay.
Then for Delirium, Hyperfocus is an interesting one. You sharpen a creature's senses, so it makes it easier for them to see things that are up close with their precise senses, and their imprecise senses are sharpened to precise senses. But anything that's beyond 20 feet, and for everything within 20 feet, and anything beyond 20 feet, they just can't perceive it at all.
Yep, that's correct. They can attempt to save against this, because it can be pretty devastating when you're kiting them from beyond 20 feet.
Yes.
And what about the second one from Delirium?
Ephemeral Hazards lets you create illusory hazards that can cause mental damage and make it difficult for creatures to move through the area if they fail on that save. You can make it really customized based on what the hazard looks like. So it might do bludgeoning, slashing, piercing, acid, cold, electricity, fire, or sonic.
It doesn't really do that damage.
It seems to. Yeah, but the resistances and weaknesses apply if the target thinks they should.
Yep.
Because they expect that to be it.
That's right. So the Dust domain gives you Parch and Dust Storm. Parch just kind of dehydrates with dry winds, so that the creature, if they have the water trait or are made of liquid, then they're in real trouble. But otherwise, like, they take a penalty to all of their checks and DCs for a round, which is, or potentially a minute, which is kind of similar to Frightened or Sickened. But, you know, it's not really either of those 2 things. And if they get a critical failure, they're also dazzled by those dehydrating winds. And if they drink a liquid, then the spell ends. So if you're like, whoa, wait a minute, a first level focus spell that gives a -1 penalty to all checks and DCs for a minute and you can't get rid of it, if they fail, that's, like, pretty intense. Well, they can drink. They can take an action to get rid of it. And it heightened to 4, targets up to 4 creatures. Dust Storm is an AoE Dust Storm that's an obscuring mist, but is also dusty, and it is fairly unbreathable, so you're going to have to hold your breath, and it also deals a little bit of slashing damage.
For the Duty domain, there is a free action focus spell. The first one is Oathkeeper's Insignia, which lets you create some kind of trinket, such as a bracelet or a flower or something else like that, which you can use to prove that you are completing the terms of a promise or deal that you've made.
And the trinket shatters if you didn't, so someone can check to see if it's there. What about the other duty?
The dutiful challenge. You can challenge an enemy to pull some of its attention away from your allies. It was sort of like, the aggro mechanic, get the attention. And the target takes penalties on their attacks and damage rolls and skill checks against creatures other than you, and you take such penalties against creatures other than target. It's more like, we're gonna duel now.
And anyone can try to break it by taking a hostile action against the challenged enemy, although other things can attack you with no problem. But
yes.
So if your friends, or even your enemies, minions, want to get rid of this penalty, they can attack the enemy.
Yes.
The glyph domain has redact as a first level.
Redacted.
Yes, you can redact something. It basically just, that's what it does. It bludges, it blurs or smudges, not bludges.
Bludgeons. Redacted.
Something.
Redacted.
And it knows what you're talking about, so if you want to redact Saren Ray from a book, it will also remove the Dawnflower. And if you heighten it out, instead of striking out a name, you could replace it with a different name, because the first one, it gives a name. So you could replace Saren Ray with Asmodeus.
For example.
And at 4th level...
Not that this has ever been used in Cheliax, so no.
At 4th level, it lasts forever, unlimited, instead of being just 1 day.
All of the records in Cheliax are 100% accurate.
Except the previous ones from last year that had been burned because they weren't
riddled with errors, but the current ones are 100% accurate.
Alright, Linda, what about the dust domain?
The dust domain has... we just did the dust domain.
No, yes, we did.
Yes.
Somehow, wait.
You flipped pages back.
I flipped pages back. Yeah, okay. How about the Deja Vu domain? How about the lightning domain?
Deja Vu was a spell that we talked about in another episode multiple times.
Yes.
Lightning domain has charged javelin, which lets you fire a javelin of electricity that leaves a persistent field of electricity that continues to shock the target.
Legit.
As well as bottle the storm. Whenever you gain electricity resistance, it's as a reaction when something hits you with electricity. And you can store that up and release it as an attack.
Aha.
Of your own.
The plague domain gives you divine plagues and foul miasma. Divine plagues sends divine plagues at something, which can plague them to either be clumsy, enfeebled, or stupefied. And it is a very fast-acting plague. Then foul miasma is going to take a creature that's affected by a disease, and it is going to turn the disease in their body into a mist that spreads out of their body and tries to infect lots of other things.
Now, Yusarian talked about from one of those previous spells, imagining hyperfocus, imagining precise smell. You don't want to have precise smell when you're near someone who's got foul miasma cast on them. I'll tell you that.
You don't. What about repose domain,
about the
Linda?
repose domain? Yes. Share burden, a reaction for when an ally who is nearby to you is trying to attempt a saving throw against a harmful emotion effect that you would not otherwise be affected by. You can bring yourself in on that effect so that both you and your ally are affected, but you use a result that is 1 degree of success better. So if your ally failed, then you can both have the effects of a success, for example.
Yep. What about Font of Serenity?
Font of Serenity is a soothing beacon of serenity that grants your allies a +1 status bonus to saving throws against emotion effects. And your allies can touch it to try to counteract an emotion effect that is currently causing them problems.
Alright, the sorrow domain. You can lament, and you can have overflowing sorrow. When you lament, then you lament in a guttural wail that deals mental damage. And if you have harmful conditions imposed by emotion effects, it deals more mental damage. It's like, why am I afraid of everything?
Yes.
And then overflowing sorrow, where sadness flows out of you into everyone that's in 15 feet of you, blotting out all of their other thoughts. giving them penalties, and if they fail, then any emotion effects of lower counteract level than overflowing sorrow are suppressed, and when they attempt to use an emotion action or cast an emotion spell, they need to make a flat check because you're just so gloomy.
For some reason, I'm imagining like an army of chibi sadnesses from Inside Out that's just like coming over and overflowing and then like completely covering them. I know that's not what this spell does.
And then the area becomes larger and larger.
Yes.
What about the soul domain, Linda?
The soul domain allows you at this first level spell to eject soul, which is awful for the target as you might expect. On a failure, you stun the creature as you briefly disrupt the soul's connection to its body, and on a critical failure, the target soul is out of the body for 1 round. And it's just this incorporeal soul that is stunned and floating there, which sounds pretty terrifying. And if you heighten it up, then if you have a willing ally who chooses to critically fail it, then they can extend that duration of the soul form. Because while the soul form, it would be troublesome if you didn't want that to happen. Being incorporeal provide some assistance with defending yourself.
Yep. What about ectoplasmic interstice?
Ectoplasmic interstice causes a temporary overlap between the material and ethereal planes that causes incorporeal creatures to lose some of those benefits of being incorporeal, such as being able to pass through solid objects. But they are then able to manipulate and attempt strength-based checks against physical creatures and objects.
All right. Star domain. There's Zenith Star and Asterism. Zenith Star makes a tiny star orbit a creature, and they're going to be marked with their location. It's going to dazzle them constantly and like shine in their eyes and basically let you know where they are at. And then Asterism is a very complicated one where you basically create a constellation type situation where the lines, there are 5 lines that are like attached to different points, and when creatures move through a line, they're going to take some damage only once per turn, no matter what. But still, you can make it really annoying, so that they're almost certainly going to have to move through it. What about the swarm domain?
Starts off with Swarm Sense that lets you create a little swarm that you can hear through. So you can sustain it to cause that swarm to go around into places, to sneakily go around into places where you are not. And the swarm gains additional forms of mobility as you heighten up the spell. So it's useful for subtle scouting missions.
What about swarm form?
And if you would rather become a swarm yourself, you can discorporate into a swarm of tiny creatures, gaining some of the resistances and weaknesses that swarms typically have. And it also allows you to squeeze through those little teeny tiny spaces that's like a swarm usually can.
Time domain. Delay consequence when you're like, oh yeah, we're going to have that happen next turn. And then stasis, where you put something into a stasis where the flow of time kind of congeals around it and time ceases to pass, which you can't really affect them, but also no time elapses for them, and then they come back out next round, or maybe in 3 rounds, or they can try to get out sooner.
Then for visual object memory, you draw out some of the memories within an object of people who have used that weapon or tool. And that allows you to temporarily become trained in that weapon if you weren't already, or to temporarily become trained in that use of the tool if you were not already. And if it's heightened up pretty high, then you can become expert instead of trained, useful for being able to use basically anything you pick up. And then Remember the Lost lets you call upon the lost and forgotten to fill your enemies' minds with memories of those who died with a grievance toward them specifically, which deals them mental damage and might frighten them. And if you know the names of anyone who the enemy has murdered or grievously wronged, for example, if you are specifically going for an enemy that you know has caused particular destruction, which, you often are going to be for some of those for some of those bigger boss types and more significant foes, then you can continually increase that damage as well. So quite useful.
A creature that truly knows no one who died with any sort of grievance to that creature is immune to this effect. Void Domain. Empty Inside is a first level spell where you're empty inside.
And PCs are not immune to this effect.
You attempt a counteract check against one emotion effect affecting you. And then you can try to do it on all of them at higher levels. And then Door to Beyond is a different kind of void than Empty Inside. You kind of strike at the air and make this Door to Beyond. And it tries to pull things towards the Door to Beyond, which can deal slashing damage to them. Wormkin.
We've got Draconic Barrage, which you can see on the facing page, in addition to making these tiny little incorporeal dragons, which, being adorable, is not their only power. I would probably cast it if it were. But they float around you, and you can command them to spit a missile of energy as a ranged breath strike.
Yes. What about Roar of the Worm?
Roar of the Worm channels the might of dragons into your voice and lets you roar in a way that dragons respect and other creatures find terrifying.
All right. Let's do items and weapons.
Yes, items and weapons.
So there are new items and weapons. Machete is a martial sword, D6 with a deadly D8 and sweep. So it's kind of an axe-like sword. Meteor Hammer is a flail, a D8 with backswing, disarm, reach, and trip. You can bet that's a two-hander, and it is. War Razor is a knife, D4, agile, but it's got agile finesse, but it's got backstabber and deadly D8 as well because it's martial weapon. And then there's some uncommon martial weapons as well.
You've got the Bladed Scarf, which you can see illustrated above, a disarm, reach, sweep, and trip weapon.
Yep. But it was supposed to have finesse, so it's going to have to lose several of those other traits or do lower damage and something. Fighting Fan, D4 agile finesse weapon that is also backstabber and deadly D6 and monk in the knife group.
Khopesh, which is a pretty straightforward sword. It's got trip.
Yep. D8 with trip. It's kind of like your longsword, but it can trip you. Mambale is a D6 axe that can disarm with deadly D8 and has a pretty good 20-foot thrown. Naginata is D8 with deadly D8, reach, and versatile piercing.
A 9-rig sword is a sword similar to the Khopesh, except this one is a sword with disarm.
Yep. Polytool is a Numerian thing. You can see the art up there. It's kind of like a Numerian Swiss Army knife type dealio. That is D6. It's modular, so you can switch out between bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing with an action, and is agile. And then Tekokagi is a D4 agile finesse, and it's got disarm, parry, and trip. So it's a fun parry weapon that if you don't want to use a Mangosh, then you can use a Tekokagi. And then Urumi is a D6 with deadly D10 and sweep.
Then we have the uncommon martial ranged weapon, the Bola.
Yes.
Which is a non-lethal ranged trip thrown sling.
Yes. I think it was picked up in APG.
Yeah, it did look familiar.
Alright, so that's all of the weapons.
You can see descriptions of them in more detail here.
Also a few magic items. So Abadar's Flawless Scale is a scale that can weigh things, and it lets you figure out how much it's worth. The Bottomless Stein of Caden Kalian. You can drink ale from the Bottomless Stein, and it keeps giving you more ale.
The Dagger of Eternal Sleep, tiny little mini sawtooth saber. That allows you to that lets you transform it into a real dagger and strike it at an unconscious target. That's
right, and you have to do it like from outside an encounter while they're just sleeping, and if you do, they are not awoken by the damage from the dagger, and you are going to give them some eternal sleep.
Yep.
Deteriorating dust is a special dust that you can get that you can sprinkle onto an object and cause the dust to fade to a transparent color and deal constant damage, like Ravagug enjoys, to the objects slowly over time until it deteriorates, and it goes more and more and more and more.
The Dread Smoke Thurble, an item of Urgathoa, delicated with the skeleton motif. You can see it up there. It lets you spread inky black smoke that obscures the vision of creatures, but not undead creatures. Undead creatures can see through it just fine.
And if you use negative type effects, then you can see through it too.
Yes.
Glaive of the Artist is a kind of a Shelonite one. I guess we should say, like, the Sawtooth Saber was an Ichakek thing. The Caden and the Abadar ones were obvious. They each do have a deity.
And Tyrading Dust was Ravagug, yes.
Yep, so Shelon has the Glaive of the Artist. It's +2 Holy Greater Striking Glaive with a rainbow-colored banner that makes you great at crafting and performance, and can, once per round, you kind of furl up one of the colored tails, and that color gives you a different ability from Corrosive, Flaming, Frost, Shocking, or Thundering. And then once per day, you can thrust it into the ground and activate the banner that is on it. And when you do that, it gives a bonus to performance check to anyone who can see it.
Then we have the Lucky Rabbit's Foot, a Talisman of Desna, that lets you reroll a reflex save. And if you still fail, then you can go ahead and get a free stride up to your speed. So
yep.
Run away before it hits you again.
The Manacles of Persuasion are Zan Kutan.
Or, run into the face of whoever caused that effect and get ready to beat down on it.
Zan Kutan manacles that they put on someone, and it makes it easier to persuade them when they're wearing those manacles, and you don't want to know what they use it for.
Yep.
The Miter of Communion is actually one of the few that is just anybody can do, and it just gives you +2 on religion checks, and you can read some omens.
Yes. The Mortar of Hidden Meaning. There's matching mortar and pestle that allows you to grind tea leaves or another similar substance to speak a message into the mortar, and then once someone drinks the tea mead from them, then they will hear the message that you spoke.
That's right. Necklace of Knives is a Pharasma item. The necklace has these miniature throwing knives, stone throwing knives, and you can interact to pluck the knife out, and it grows into a stone, steel, or wooden dagger. So you can stake a vampire or whatever you need to do.
Then there's the Ratcatcher Trident, which is associated with Hanspur, the drowning god of the Selin River and the River Kingdoms, who's often depicted with rat-like imagery. It is a +2 striking trident that lets you control water.
Very quickly.
Yes.
The Singing Bowl of the Versatile Stance is an item of Iruri. It is a singing bowl, and as an action, an interact action, you can strike it, and anyone within 60 feet in a stance can spend a reaction to use a stance action to change to a different stance.
And then we can see Torag's Silver Anvil here, which you can wield it as a +3 Holy Greater Flaming Greater Striking Silver Meteor Hammer.
Because it's on a chain, so you swing it around like a meteor hammer with an anvil.
So it fits both things, right? You can swing it around as this ridiculous weapon, or you can use it as a portable forge that lets you work without a furnace and grants a +3 item bonus to crafting checks involving metalworking.
If you use it to successfully repair a metal item, the item recovers additional hit points. So yeah, you just carry it around, then you drop it down, and you don't even need a forge. Smack the enemies,
and then you use it as a forge. Perfect for Torag worshippers.
Now then, let's be biased about the appendix. So
normally we might say, like, why do we bother talking about appendices as much? But this one
is a huge appendix.
One.
It was a massive amount of effort.
It provides information,
and almost all of that effort
deities.
Was done by Eleanor, because she did like most of this.
So here we've got for each of these, you're going to have the deity, the alignment, then in the parentheticals, all the alignments of followers that they accept, their domains, their cleric spells, their favorite weapons, their divine ability scores, the divine skills, the divine font, whether they've got harm or heal, their key edicts, and key anathemas.
That's right. So you've got all different categories here. We're not going to go through all of them, but there's the ancient Osirian gods from Anumu to Wobbuffet. And then
Watch it.
Yes, and it's Anubis, not Amumu.
Oh, you said Amumu.
I said Anumu.
I see. I heard Anubis too. Anyway.
Yeah, it's Anubis to Wadjet.
Then we have the information about all of the Archdevils.
Who we talked about before.
Yes, the Demon Lords.
Yeah, there's Demon Lords. It's not all of the Demon Lords.
But it's the ones who appeared in this book.
It was all of the Archdevils.
Yes.
But it's not all of the Demon Lords.
The Dwarven Pantheon, all the gods of the Dwarven Pantheon.
I think it does catch all of those. The eldest of the Fae that we talked about. The Elemental Lords, including the imprisoned Elemental Lords, I think. Let me see. Does it get them all?
Yeah, it does.
It's on the next page.
Next page.
The Elven Pantheon, all of them. Imperial Lords is only a subset because there is just like Demon Lords, there are a massive ton of Imperial Lords.
If you're looking for information on more expansive lists of Demon Lords and Imperial Lords, there are some great first edition books to check out for that lore.
Oh yes.
The Horsemen.
It has all four.
4 horsemen. The Monitor demigods who were featured in this book.
Yep.
And a list of other gods.
Other gods.
Yes.
Just some random ones. The other gods look like it has, like Hanspur, who we talked about briefly. It has some like demigods who are on the material plane, like Genduin from the Fangwood in near Mothis. It's got like Thessalonian and Aslanti deities, a few of them, like Jaidi and Lisala. It's got a dragon deities like Apsu and Dahak. So it's just got some random ones. Another demigod on the material plane, Walkina, from Mizali. Just it's a hodgepodge. And then the outer gods and great old outer elder thing.
And
people.
You can see here that they have
those are the ones from the book
featured in this book. And one notable feature of these guys, which is worth pointing out, is the key anathema for all of them, which is none.
They don't care about you.
They don't care what you do.
Do whatever you want. They will do whatever they want, which is destroy the universe.
Yep.
The Queens of the Night, which has the 3 from this book, plus Ardad Lily, unless Ardad Lily was also there.
She was in this book.
Oh, she was, so all 4 of them were.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind. 3 sample Sarkorian gods, just so you can see what they look like, and then a bunch of Tian deities. I think all of the ones that are just like only in... No, I don't think there was a section in this book for Tian Sha. But this will have all the ones the 2 who were in the the major deities section, or in the secondary deities, and then all the other ones who were like just Tian Sha. But a lot of the general Golarian deities are also worshipped in Tian Sha. Vudrani deities, and that's just a subset because there are a lot of them, but it's got Gru, who did appear in this book. Oh no, right, the ones who appeared in the book aren't there because they don't need to be.
That's right.
Chizuru and Sukiyo aren't in the Tian gods, and and Gru is not in the Vudrani deity.
The ones who appeared in the larger section, but like the ones who appeared in the shorter things, like
the snake god of jerks is probably in here somewhere.
Probably is.
It's like we
is he the serpent of 80 blades?
Yes.
Diamazul, yeah.
Yeah, Diamazul. It's like we call him a less polite version of that because when we were playing Curse of the Crimson Throne, we dimension doored down into the ground, hoping to get into a dungeon kind of at random, and based on exactly how we angled it, the GM checked the map, and we wound up appearing in a giant trap room that like nearly killed us. That was like you see this weird snake, and then all these swords come out. It's like roll a knowledge check, and we rolled it. It's like it's this guy, and he's a snake god who likes to kill you. And we called him we called him a less polite version of the snake god of jerks.
Yes, because it's like it's this god. Now the statue's killing you.
Yes. And so he's the main Vudrani deity that I always remember.
And then here we have in the back the
gloss text. The gloss text. That's very important, everyone.
Which gives you information about these various locations, the planes that are talked about.
We can't talk about Eleanor doing the other appendix without talking about Luis doing the gloss text.
So if you're wondering, like, what is the Shadow Plane or the Sarkoris Scar, or when it talks about a primordial inevitable, what does that mean? Then you can check this out. And for a lot of them, it gives some more context for resources that you can look at to learn more.
And not to mention the OGL, which contains only one entry, Married, which is in every Lost Omens.
Oh, Married.
It doesn't have a secret message after printed in China yet, because we've gone back in time past the point where they did that. But it still has Married.
All right, everybody.
All right,
and that was Lost Omens, Gods, and Magic. Thank you all for joining us today.
Let's do our outro after we say bye to YouTube. Bye. YouTube!